Australia to the rescue. Gabrial Shipton, brother of Wikileaks founder Julian Assange, who has been confined in prison in Belmarsh in London since 2019, earlier this month tweeted a meme showing heads of 6 notable Australian politicians photoshopped onto the bodies of Marvel's Avengers characters, writing, "Assangers assemble." He wrote, "Not a fan of the Avengers movies, but have a huge soft spot for these courageous politicians who will travel to Washington, D.C. this month to free Julian Assange," referring to the delegation that took place earlier this month where Australian political leaders lobbied on behalf of Julian Assange and have called on the United States to drop the charges against Assange, according to the Columbia Journalism Review.
More than 60 Australian members of parliament have called on the United States to drop the persecution of Assange, warning of a, quote, sharp and sustained outcry in Australia if he's extradited, according to The Guardian. Joining us now is filmmaker and the brother of Julian Assange, Gabrial Shipton. Gabriel, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Great to have you with us. Is there hope? Is there something positive underfoot based on this meeting of Australian officials that could augur well for Julian's fate?
Yeah, I really think that this delegation will have an impact here. What the message that they're bringing is that 9 out of 10 Australians believe that the charges against Julian should be dropped, and that's recent polling. Australia is a key ally of the US. It's a resource-rich country. It's located in the Pacific, and I don't think the alliance between the US and Australia can be taken for granted. And these politicians are here to communicate that to people in DC, to Congress people, meetings with the State Department and DOJ. So I think it's a different sort of message. It's a foreign relations message and a message from the Australian people that I think can really have make a difference in the fight to free Julian.
Yeah, I'm curious, the poll you just cited about the Australian public versus the United States, what do you have a sense of as the public perception here, and how much do you think that's playing a role in our government being so kind of deaf to concerns of civil libertarians who have been advocating for your brother's release?
Well, there's just I'd put this down to there's a few sort of wrong-headed people in this in this administration and in the security state who are just really pushing forward with this. So you've had the New York Times writing to the Justice Department calling on them to drop this case. You've had every major civil society organisation, NGO in the United States, 25 of them, including ACLU, Human Rights Watch, all calling on the Justice Department to bring this to an end. And just earlier this year, you had Congress people, 7 progressive Congress people writing letters to the DOJ. So there is momentum here, and it is a very contentious prosecution against the publisher for publishing evidence of war crimes, evidence of corruption around the globe. So I think you can see the momentum building among society here in the US as well. But I think this foreign relations angle could just get some of those people over the line. Some people who value this relationship more than they value, their pound of flesh of Julian Assange.
Yeah, given those poll numbers you shared, so there is a real appreciation for what Julian has done among the Australian people, or is it more of, he's one of our people and he should be brought back here? Or is there an actual real, public appreciation for his journalistic role?
Yeah, there definitely is a public appreciation for what Julian did with his work for WikiLeaks, but also this sense of that Julian is not getting fair treatment, that he's an Australian father, he has 2 kids and a wife, and that he has not been treated fairly by our closest ally, which is the United States. And so there's this, issue of fairness in Australia, and we just the Australian people just want Julian to be treated fairly. And really, one thing that's cut through in Australia is that you have Chelsea Manning, who leaked the material. Her sentence was commuted under the Obama administration in 2017, and so Australians are like, well, hold on, you've got the American leaker who leaked this information, has been able to participate in society for the last 6 years, but the Australian publisher, who all they did was the same thing that the New York Times did, The Guardian did, they're still in jail, and it just doesn't add up to Australians. They say, how is this fair that the Australian is still in prison?
Yeah, I have seen a number of interviews in which an American journalist or political figure will be trying to make a point about how America is more free than the other person's country. The kinds of countries we have stereotypically described as authoritarian theocracies, things like that.
Like Canada.
No, and usually so the other party in the conversation will be from some, let's say, Middle Eastern country, and they will throw back in the American journalists or politicians' face, rightly so, I think, well, what about Julian Assange? And I do think there has been a growing sentiment globally, especially with escalations in the proxy war in Ukraine, the global South largely feeling like they're bearing the brunt of the implications of that war, the growth of BRICS as an economic alliance, that America's standard line about how it's doing what it's doing in defense of democracy and in global interests is falling. It's falling flat. It's increasingly weak. And we talked on the show about maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about how some of the geopolitical conversations around Taiwan and escalations with China very much implicate Australian foreign policy. And there is this question of, well, if you're going to be there for us, if you're really going to be an ally as things grow increasingly tense in the region, are you still unwilling to hold up your stated principles of democracy, even in service of an ally that you are literally leaning on in this particular geopolitical moment? So I want to ask you a little bit more about the nature of the people in this delegation who have come to the United States right now. Who are they? What do they mean for Australians? And how influential do you think they might be in an American context?
Well, I think one really important part of the delegation is they're totally cross-party. There's representatives from every party in Australian politics. You've got the Greens, who are on the left, Labor, who's in a left-leaning government, the National Party and the Liberals on the Conservative side, and an independent. So it's really
we're jealous of just the number of parties you listed actually having participation in the political process, which is not something we have here.
No, but it's a total cross-section of Australian political class, and that's a reflection of the deep feeling in Australia. It's not a left or right issue. It's an issue for all Australians, and that's really how the delegation is represented. You also have the Prime Minister of Australia, who's been publicly calling on the US to end this prosecution, and just recently the leader of the opposition in Australia has made those same calls. So there's unity among the political class.
Yeah, it's not really a left-right issue here either, but that's because obviously both administrations that are part of both parties have been in power and have overseen the continuing persecution and have done nothing to fix it, even though, while initially I think there was a lot of Republican hostility to WikiLeaks when it first arrived during the kind of war on terror era, then it shifted because of WikiLeaks' critical reporting on Hillary Clinton, and now many Democrats had it out, and some Republicans actually liked what WikiLeaks was doing. So it's kind of scrambled here. But is there any sense? We're now more than halfway through a subsequent Democratic administration. We could have a Republican administration after this. We could have another Democratic administration. We don't know. Do you have any sense that what's going on corresponds to the R or D, to the political element of what our government does?
Well, I think the delegation has secured meetings with both sides of both sides in Congress and in the Senate. So I think that's an important indicator of there is bipartisan support for the prosecution to be dropped, and bipartisan interest in participating in meetings with this delegation. So I think that's an important signifier. But if you talk about journalism and publishing without fear or favour, and those principles that are at stake in this case, I think it goes past the political really and goes to those sort of core principles that are at the heart of our Western democracies. And what Julian, just to pick up on that point you were talking about earlier, is this what's happening to Julian is the sort of race to the bottom, in a sense, in going after journalists around the world. And we've seen, they came for Julian first, but then, people like Evan Gershkovich, or there's Australian journalists who are now imprisoned in China, charged with espionage. And so you have these other authoritarian regimes around the world just copycatting exactly what's been done to Julian Assange.
Can you speak a little to your brother's health? I don't want to lose sight of the human aspect of what we're talking about here. How's he holding up?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I'm always amazed that he's able to continue fighting. All these years, I think he's been arbitrarily detained one way or another for the last 13 years. 4 years in a maximum security prison with this endless process going on. He is holding up. His health is deteriorating, as you would expect anybody under these circumstances. Their mental and physical health, which are both linked, to be deteriorating. But he does have a fighting spirit, so I'm always incredibly amazed. But it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking going and seeing him, inside that prison and just watching him, slowly being crushed by this whole process that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
When did you last see him?
I'm going to see him in October this year, but I haven't seen him for a year. Yeah, it's pulled our family apart, this whole thing. So looking forward to going and seeing him.
Is there a next step coming up on the process that you're waiting on to find out if he's going to be extradited?
Yeah, certainly. So Julian has one final avenue in the UK courts. He has submitted an application to appeal, and the court will have an in-person hearing before 2 judges, and they'll decide whether to hear the appeal or reject the appeal. And if they decide to reject the appeal, the extradition could move quite quickly. We were expecting a date to be set last Friday, but that didn't happen. So we're expecting a date now, any day now, and that hearing could happen within 3 weeks or so. So the end of the UK process, it's almost at an end. So really, we're coming to the sort of the end of that process and the pointy end of that process of Julian almost being here in the United States.
Gabriel, where can viewers who would like to continue to follow this and perhaps be supportive of your efforts find you in the cause online?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter, Gabrial Shipton, or Twitter or X, and also AssangeDefense.org is the sort of homepage for the US campaign, and they can join the campaign there and find out different actions or how to support at AssangeDefense.org.
Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you both.
More Rising right after this.